Completely and totally obliterated. Those scorching words burst across the airwaves, leaving global audiences stunned. Imagine waking up to the news that, overnight, the United States has executed a massive surprise operation against Iran's most guarded nuclear facilities. Hardly anyone saw it coming. There was no immediate warning, no gradual escalation that the average person could track in live time. Yet here we are, facing a sudden turning point in Middle Eastern affairs and possibly in the entire global landscape of security and alliance. But what exactly happened? How did we arrive at this explosive moment, where the world's headlines scream about obliterated sites, demands for peace, and declarations of imminent retaliation? Today, I invite you on a deep dive into the tensions, the secret maneuvers, and the thunderous revelations that have rocked the globe from Washington to Tehran and beyond. We will piece together the puzzle, from why the United States launched these airstrikes out of the blue, to how Israel kicked off a chain reaction mere days before, and finally, what the potential fallout could look like for ordinary people around the world. In this episode, we will unravel the unspoken strategies behind the high-tech bombs, discover the motives and missteps of key leaders, and ask the tough question, are we on the brink of a much larger confrontation that no single nation can contain? First, let us set the scene. On the 21st of June local time, the presidency under Donald Trump's second administration unleashed a sweeping airborne assault that targeted 3 separate facilities in the heart of Iran's nuclear program: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. If those names sound vaguely familiar, it is because they have figured into numerous reports by international agencies for quite some time, each one hosting top-tier nuclear enrichment capabilities shielded behind fortifications that are not easy to penetrate. According to various accounts, including claims made by government officials, these targets represent the very core of Iran's drive toward nuclear self-sufficiency, an aspiration that has been a headache for more than one foreign power for many years now. But why now, and why so suddenly? The formal statement from President Trump painted the airstrike as a measured response, albeit a forceful one, to what he termed the destructive nuclear program that Iran had refused to relinquish. In front of cameras, he argued that Tehran's leadership had left him no other choice, that negotiations had stalled, and that immediate action was necessary to prevent further destabilization in the region. Iran, for its part, swiftly denied any wrongdoing. In an unyielding broadcast, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, vowed unmitigated retaliation and labeled the United States as a reckless aggressor. Meanwhile, international reactions began pouring in, with Israel wholeheartedly praising the move, while other nations responded more cautiously, uncertain of where these moves might lead the region and the world. Of course, the story had already been simmering before the United States sent bombers across the sky. Just 8 days prior, on the 13th of June, Israel had launched a large-scale preemptive strike on Iranian military assets, signaling a major escalation in a decades-long shadow dance between those two nations. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, now sees the American attack as further validation of his own hawkish stance, even calling it a historic decision that will be remembered for generations. Yet for many onlookers, it also raises a troubling question. With Israel's moves and now the American entry on an even larger scale, could the entire region be bordering on a conflict that dwarfs anything we have seen since the 2003 Iraq War? Before we venture deeper, let us pause for a moment. If you are as fascinated by these jaw-dropping developments as we are, please feel free to show your support. A simple thumbs up or an encouraging comment right now will help spread this crucial information far and wide. Now, let us keep the momentum going, because there is so much more to uncover. One spine-chilling detail in this entire affair is the nature of the bombs reportedly used in the latest strike, the so-called bunker busters, formerly identified as GBU-57 bombs, reputed for their ability to punch through layers of fortified concrete and steel before detonating with unimaginable force. The Fordow facility in particular has long been recognized as one of Iran's most secure nuclear sites, built deep underground precisely to shield it from bombardment. Multiple experts used to speculate that it would be nearly impossible for conventional weapons to do more than minor damage there, let alone obliterate important sections. However, if reports are true and the United States used these specialized bombs on Fordow, it suggests that the American military has been poised to make a dramatic statement for a while. In a nighttime address that was broadcast from Washington, President Trump declared that the Iranian nuclear projects at the 3 targeted sites had been destroyed. He insisted the approach had been surgical, carried out with minimal risk to civilian life, though Iranian media vehemently disputed those claims and recounted multiple stories of local families scrambling for shelter as blasts ripped through the night sky. Meanwhile, many watchers pointed out that this is the first direct major assault by the United States on a Middle Eastern power without explicit immediate provocation, since the now infamous operations in Iraq that began in the early 2000s. The memory of that conflict and its messy aftermath still looms large in the collective global consciousness. But one must ask, what exactly triggered these strikes, especially at a time when it seemed like diplomatic channels, though often shaky, had not been completely abandoned? Some analysts point to Iran's steadfast refusal to abandon or even scale back its nuclear ambitions. Others highlight that Israel's actions days earlier might have forced Washington's hand, lest it be seen as lax in the face of what it perceives as a growing regional threat. Another angle is that domestic politics in the United States could be playing a role, with the presidential administration seeking to project strength at a pivotal moment. Political watchers have argued that when leaders feel cornered by domestic criticisms, they sometimes turn to external shows of force to rally support back home. Yet there is another dimension here that might not be immediately clear to casual observers. The United States has had a complex relationship with Iran for decades, and the nuclear question is only one piece of a multifaceted mosaic that involves proxy conflicts, economic sanctions, and alliances that crisscross the Middle Eastern map. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and especially its Quds Force, have been pivotal in shaping Iran's foreign strategy insofar as supporting or influencing other entities in the region. Israeli airstrikes reportedly took out key figures and missile launch sites connected to that very Quds Force, a move that paves the way for an even more heightened sense of urgency on Iran's side. Now, with American GBU-57 bombs slamming into the Iranian heartland, the question becomes, how far will Iran go in its vow to retaliate? That vow of retaliation came swiftly, with Iranian state television not only condemning the strikes, but also proclaiming that Iran would target American nationals and allies in the Middle East. Although such statements might be seen as typical reactions following a major strike, the heated tone and the mention of going after civilian targets has alarmed the broader international community. The fear is that if Iran decides to respond outside its borders in a dramatic or symbolic move, the conflict could explode on multiple fronts, dragging countless communities into the line of fire. Even as the tension soared, the White House doubled down on its stance. In a defiant speech, President Trump labeled Iran the bully of the Middle East, echoing language that some consider reminiscent of prior administrations that deem certain nations part of an axis of evil. That loaded historical context can stir up old animosities, as well as fears that once again the world may see a drawn-out conflict with a dire toll on both sides. Some veteran observers recall that the 2003 invasion of Iraq led to far-reaching consequences, including changes in power structures and fueling extremist groups. Here, the risk is that a new wave of turmoil might feed into an already volatile region, fostering pockets of violence or radicalization that might otherwise have stayed dormant. Meanwhile, allies of both sides are walking a tightrope. For instance, European powers have, in past years, tried to play a mediator role by forging nuclear deals or at least opening lines of negotiation. The sense now is that those diplomatic efforts are in jeopardy, or at least overshadowed by the thunderclap of airstrikes and retaliatory rhetoric. Russia and China, with their complex ties to the Middle East and to Iran specifically, may see a chance to gain influence if Washington is perceived as overreaching. On the other hand, some officials in those countries could be wary of standing too close to Tehran if the situation tips into a dangerous confrontation that nobody can fully control. And what of everyday people in Iran, Israel, and the broader region? Many are already grappling with economic strain, concerns about public safety, and the possibility of intensifying hostilities. Scenes from the immediate aftermath of the bombings show individuals hastening to shelters, uncertain whether more strikes might follow. Social media platforms exploded with a barrage of images, unverified claims, and pleas for peace. The swirl of misinformation makes it tough to separate rumor from fact, fueling anxiety on a massive scale. In a time when clarity is desperately needed, it takes an effort to filter out sensational claims from credible developments. In light of all this, do you feel that the gravity of these events deserves more attention? If so, this is a perfect moment to follow along, subscribe, or share your thoughts so that important truths do not get buried beneath the avalanche of sensational headlines. Staying connected could make a difference for people searching for reliable insights. Let us stand together in demanding transparency and a concerted push for solutions before things spiral further. Now, with calls for peace echoing across diplomatic channels, the question on everyone's mind is whether a genuine path exists to pull the region back from the brink. Some officials in the United Nations, as well as human rights organizations, have demanded that both the United States and Iran hold back from further escalations and resume negotiations. The big hurdle here is that the trust deficit is immense. Each side hears the other's words, but sees actions on the ground that reinforce worst-case thinking. A cycle of fear can trap nations in a loop, where every move to ramp up defenses is interpreted by the opponent as preparation for attack. Could a figure on the global stage, be it a leading European official, an impartial coalition of states, or even a broad-based international summit, manage to broker some stability now that the bombs have quite literally fallen? Complicating matters further is that Israeli involvement remains a wild card. Having begun its own strikes 8 days ahead of the American ones, Israel has shown it is not shy about confronting Iranian interests when it believes its security is at stake. Prime Minister Netanyahu's remarks praising the United States hint that the two allies are cooperating closely, at least in the short term. Tehran, naturally, sees that cooperation as evidence of a conspiracy to suppress Iranian influence and sabotage the country's nuclear ambitions. If Israel chooses to continue its offensives, the uneasy balance might tip into open warfare across multiple battlefields. Alternatively, perhaps the very show of strength might force Iran to the negotiating table, though that seems unlikely given the rhetorical fury unleashed by Iran's leadership. Another factor is how the Middle Eastern power players, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, and others, respond to the realignment of confrontation lines. Some may quietly rejoice that someone else is taking the bold steps to curb Iran's influence, while others may worry that a large-scale war would devastate the region's economic and political stability at a time when the markets are already facing shortages and global uncertainty. Oil sectors, shipping routes, and foreign investments hang in the balance, as many experts fear that a broader conflict would upend already fragile supply chains. Heightened conflict can also create waves of refugees, as families flee border regions in anticipation of airstrikes or ground campaigns. And then there is the question of public opinion stateside. Historically, sustained military engagements far from home can become unpopular if they drag on without clear benefits or end goals. While President Trump's speech framed the mission as a precise stroke meant to protect world peace, critics in the United States caution that the line between a swift operation and a quagmire is dangerously thin. Some congresspeople and influential voices in the American political sphere argue that if the administration does not present a coherent follow-up strategy, the nation risks getting stuck in an open-ended scenario, an eerily familiar echo of events that transpired in the early 2000s. Meanwhile, supporters of the strikes insist that strong, decisive action is the only language Tehran understands, and that stepping back would only embolden Iran to further expand its nuclear ventures. Yet what truly keeps strategists and countless ordinary families awake at night is the potential for an even greater conflagration if other alliances or proxy groups jump into the fray. Iran's vow to retaliate stands out starkly, and some fear that extended hostilities might open a Pandora's box of violence far beyond straightforward missile exchanges. Cyber attacks on infrastructure, sabotage of major supply routes, attacks by proxy militias, these are all scenarios that Middle Eastern watchers have discussed, and once such actions begin, they can escalate rapidly, pulling in more actors who see an opportunity or who feel compelled to defend their interests. Given all these complexities, it is more crucial than ever for the public to get clear, direct insights that cut through propaganda. That might mean watching official statements, but also cross-checking with reputable global media, or keeping an eye out for unbiased on-the-ground reporting. It is in that spirit of seeking a fuller picture that we are delving so thoroughly into the context, the players, and the possible next steps of this brewing conflict. Everyone has a role to play in amplifying honest reporting and calling for responsible leadership. As the dust settles, the United States has made it clear they will not hesitate to strike again if Tehran's rhetoric becomes action. President Trump explicitly declared that the bombardments so far were only a fraction of what the American military could do if provoked. Meanwhile, leaders in Tehran are describing the bombings as an act of war itself, a transgression that must be avenged to uphold national pride and security. This fundamental clash of perspectives underscores how difficult it will be to find any immediate off-ramp from escalating tensions. In the midst of these far-reaching echoes, we have to circle back to one essential truth. These are not simply strategic maneuvers on a chessboard. They involve human lives and communities that strive to overcome daily challenges, even without the specter of war. Families across Iran, whether supportive of their government or skeptical of its policies, now face the question of how safe their children can be if the cycle of violence intensifies. Households in Israel, already under routine pressure from regional hostilities, wonder if a larger confrontation looms on the horizon. American forces stationed in various Middle Eastern hubs are bracing themselves for possible counterattacks, which might come in unpredictable forms and places. In short, the repercussions are not isolated to political chess pieces, but extend to tens of millions of people who could be thrust into conflict or economic turmoil. Our final question, then, is this: can the major powers step back from the brink and rediscover the possibility of negotiation before the region plunges deeper into chaos? A glimmer of hope might come if cooler heads within each government manage to gain influence and push for dialogue, even in the midst of enraged public speeches. Nonetheless, for that to happen, every side will likely demand certain guarantees. The United States might insist that Iran halt all nuclear progress immediately, and Iran might demand the complete lifting of sanctions and a cessation of foreign intrusion into its territory. Are both these demands reconcilable in the short term? That remains uncertain, especially under the weight of heated emotion and national pride. Yet throughout history, even conflicts that seemed irreconcilable have found brief windows of opportunity for diplomacy. For anybody following this story moment by moment, it is important to not get lost in the swirl of rumor. It would be all too easy for half-truths to lead to an even more volatile situation. If you have stuck with this exploration until now, you are exactly the kind of person who can help keep the dialogue informed and grounded. So, if you want to stay aware of every new development or potentially game-changing twist, do not hesitate to connect, share, and keep the discussion going. Only by continuing to follow, learn, and question can we hope to avoid the pitfalls of misinformation. In conclusion, the events of these last several days have rattled global politics in a profound way. On the surface, it looks like a straightforward story of one superpower striking a defiant regional player. But beneath that surface lurk complicated alliances, historical grievances, national pride, and real human fears about what might erupt next. For the time being, all eyes remain on whether Iran will exact its promised revenge, and whether the United States is truly prepared to escalate if necessary. Upcoming statements from both sides, perhaps couched in diplomatic niceties or full of fiery threats, will shape the next phase of this story. We can only hope that rational minds, diplomatic channels, and the recognition of mutual catastrophic risk will prevail before the cycle of violence spins even further out of control. Prepare yourselves, because in a conflict of this magnitude, each passing hour can transform the landscape. Something that seems unthinkable one moment can become tomorrow's headline. We have seen that happen already, as the Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan facilities went from looming threats to blasted ruins in a blink of an eye, effectively shaping how the world views the balance of power. Where there is tension, there is also the burning possibility of progress, provided the leaders involved realize the unimaginable costs at stake. As we sign off, keep these developments on your radar. Keep talking about them with your community. Keep an eye on what your representatives are doing or not doing, and let us sustain a vigilant watch in the days ahead. The next moves from all parties will matter immensely, not only for the Middle East, but for the fundamental ideals of peace, security, and respect on the world stage. Will there be a corner turned toward negotiation, or will we see the opening chapters of a conflict that leaves lasting scars for decades to come? Only time will tell, but our best hope lies in paying close attention, demanding clarity, and encouraging solutions that do not rely on unrelenting force. Stay tuned, stay engaged, and stay aware, because the story is only just beginning, and its outcome will shape destinies far beyond the borders of the Iranian deserts and the American political landscape.